I also wanted to ask you about Sinwar. Uh, in retrospect, do you believe the Israelis made a mistake by assassinating someone like Haniya, who's more moderate, knows, goes around and so on, and now you have someone who's probably a lot less moderate, more militant, probably more isolated, not exposed in terms of leading negotiations?
Look, the way I'll answer that is ultimately Sinwar ought to have the interests of the Palestinian people at heart. That's what he said before. And when you think about what has happened to Palestinians in Gaza since October 7th, since the outset of a war that Sinwar decided to start, there have been devastating humanitarian consequences. And Sinwar has been immune from those consequences because he's safe underground. He's immune from the tragedy that his actions have wrought on the Palestinian people, and that they continue to bring upon the Palestinian people by Hamas fighters hiding inside civilian infrastructure. So ultimately, as I said to, I think it was Olivia's question, Sinwar ought to make the same calculation as Hanea or any other leader of Hamas would, which it is time for a ceasefire. So the harm that the Palestinian people in Gaza are feeling can finally be alleviated, that we can surge more humanitarian assistance in, and ultimately we can bring an end to this war.
So, that brings me to this question. It's been more than 2 months since the president on May 31 announced a proposal, and it was, he said that it was an Israeli proposal. Yet we really are not going anywhere. I mean, more Palestinians are being killed every day. There's less humanitarian aid and so on is going in and so on. The situation is very, very dire. It seems no end in sight. So what steps can the United States take to make sure that this actually is, the field goal is reached?
So first of all, we have come a long ways in terms of getting an agreement to the proposal. When you look at the agreement, the pieces of the proposal that have been agreed to by the two sides, it is a remarkable step forward from where they were several months ago. And there are a lot of things responsible for that, but one of them is the very hard work that the governments of the United States, the governments of Egypt, and the governments of Qatar put into trying to get this proposal over the line and get a framework of agreed to. Now that said, nothing is final until everything is final, so we do need to reach agreement on these final issues. And so all we can do as the United States is push all of the relevant parties to come to an agreement, to work diplomatically to try to get them to come to an agreement, and to continue to impress upon every party in the region how further escalation of the conflict threatens the ability to reach a ceasefire, has the risk of further plunging the region into conflict and violence and wider war, and so it's in no party's interest to take those further escalatory steps.
I wonder if you would comment on the situation in the West Bank. Yesterday, the Israeli occupation forces killed 10 Palestinians, basically executed them. And of course, they were holding money, they're seizing the money and so on. The situation is really deteriorating in the West Bank. It's in many places, it's not much better than what's going on in Gaza.
So two different things in your question with respect to anti-terrorism operations that Israel has conducted. They have a right to defend themselves. They have a right to conduct anti-terrorism operations. I saw that in the reports of some of those Palestinians who were killed, you had Palestinian Islamic Jihad praising them as members of the resistance and members of the armed resistance. So those are obviously people that Israel has a right to conduct legitimate terrorism operations against. When it comes to the withholding of Palestinian tax revenues, however, that's a different matter. We have made very clear that Israel needs to release all of that money. It's Palestinian money. And if you have seen our diplomatic engagements on this question over the past several months, produce results time and time again. Not all of the money has been released, but a very significant portion of the money that at times Israel has withheld has been released as a result of the work that we have put into this.
So Israel has a right to use fighter planes, fighter jets supplied by the United States against an occupied people?
I'm not going to speak to. I'm not going to speak to each strike or each specific tactic, but they do have the right to, when there are people, when there are militants who are plotting terrorist operations against Israel, of course they have the right. Of course they have the right to carry out strikes and other anti-terrorism operations to defend against those to defend against terrorism.